Hi, this is Tim Lightfellow in the Kingdom of Ontario Society for Creative Anachronism. I have been recording various classes and instructional videos about traditional archery with regard to equipment maintenance, repair, and such. And I'm attempting now to fill in some of the steps for making my own arrows. Some of the repair in that overlaps with the process of making, such as straightening shafts, straightening arrows, and such. So this is going to be a fairly short video because there's a few steps that lead into straightening, and I've already done a video on straightening. I've separated out how to straighten hardwood versus how to straighten normal arrow shafts. Things like Port Orford, cedar, spruce, things like that would be normal. Hickory would be an example of a hardwood. So typically when you get your shafts in, depending on how you order them, you receive approximately 32-inch long arrow shafts. And what I have here, if you can see the difference, the bottom one is hickory, the top one is spruce. So the process I'm about to describe applies to the softer woods and does not apply to the hickory. What I've found with the hickory, it is such a rough surface wood that the process I use doesn't work. This is actually my second set of hickory shafts I'm working on, so I've learned a bit on the first set. The other thing I've learned is that the sealant I'm using smooths it out enough that it's not a concern. However, on softer woods, what you can end up with if you don't go through these steps is, like if you apply a dye or something, or if you use a stain as your coating, it can actually raise the grain of the shaft so the shaft isn't smooth. It's not necessarily a major issue, but it can affect the way it flies. So what I do when I get them, depending if I've ordered 1 dozen matched, then I assume they're the same and just work on them. If I've ordered, like I normally do for crossbow bolts, I order about 200 shafts. For those, the first thing I do is I pull them out and I go through and weigh them. So here's an example. Here's the type of scale I purchased. The important part of that is it does grains, which is a finer unit of measure than grams or ounces. So I will go through and I will measure, and let's see if this one shows it. It does not. I will, with a pencil on the very end, I'll write down the grains, and then when I'm done weighing them, I will go through and sort them into bundles of a dozen based on their grain weight. So I can usually, if I order 200, end up with sets that are within 2 or 3 grains for most of them, and then when you get to the outer edges of the weights, then you end up with 5 to 7 or 8 grain separation. That lets you keep it to a close weight so that the end result is a fairly well-matched set of arrows or bolts. Once they're weighed, once you have them separated, or as I said, if you've ordered just 1 dozen, so what you have is what you're working with, the next step that I do is I take like a washcloth, standard washcloth, terry towel, whatever, get it not dripping wet, but kind of just short of that. And I go through every shaft and rub them down and get them damp. And then I set them aside 15, 20, 30 minutes, depending on how wet they were. Make sure they have time to dry. That raises the grain. And then once the grain is raised and they're dry, I take them, the way I do it is I'll take them outside and I use what's referred to often as quadruple aught or 40 steel wool, and I literally wrap it around and I'll buff the shaft until it's smooth. One thing I've noticed in my experience, if you're working with different woods, spruce doesn't get quite as smooth feeling. Port Orford cedar can get really, really smooth feeling with that. I will also point out an alternative. A lot of people will use, instead of using something like that, they'll actually use sandpaper and they'll do finer and finer grit. I think I know one person who went to at least 1200 or 1500 grit to make sure he had just really super smooth arrow shafts at the start. So that is the process for getting them to a point where you are ready to then straighten them, which again, I've already done videos on. And then we'll move on to other steps, which I will also do individual videos. I'm trying to break them down per step so that, you know, if someone's stuck on one step in the process, they don't have to watch an entire long video or to try and find the segment that covers what they need help with. So hopefully this helps. As usual, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.